Hello everybody and welcome, all thanks to LD Mobile. This is NBL Overtime, and what has been a dramatic week, a dramatic 3 days, and then a dramatic day which has seen the end of NBL 20. Hashtag see incredible, not just in our basketball league that we've loved for so long, but also right across the world as a pandemic changes the way we live our life, which of course in turn hurts the way we look at sport. Plenty to get into. Hashtag NBL Overtime, hashtag see incredible, hashtag NBL 20 to get involved. It is going to be a much different show to the one we expected to bring you halfway through an NBL Grand Final series. Corey Homicide Williams is here. He'll be joining us on the desk very shortly. Right now though, Liam Santamaria, hello to you.
Okay.
And the Commissioner of the NBL, Jeremy Loeliger, joins us as well. Jeremy, hello to you. And what has been a remarkable 5 or 6 days. We're going to get to how it's all played out very shortly. But I'm sure you know that last Thursday afternoon Australian time, the Utah Jazz and the Oklahoma City Thunder were about to play a game of basketball. When pandemonium really did ensue, it was then reported only moments after the game had been cancelled that Rudy Gobert had tested positive to the coronavirus. It changed the way in which I think a lot of us, rightly or wrongly, viewed what was happening in the world, and it definitely changed the context of sport. Friday afternoon rolled around as we headed towards a game at RAC Arena that involved the Perth Wildcats leading 1-0 after their win in Sydney against the Sydney Kings team, who were desperate to tie it up. Then the decision by the NBL headquarters, which Jeremy will run us through shortly, that we had no fans. The game did not suffer. Sydney tied it up at 1. Sunday, again, an exhilarating, outstanding game of basketball as the Wildcats, led by Cotton and Kay, took the 2-1 series lead. And then it led us into the murmurs that started early Tuesday morning to the press conference. First, Larry Kesselman with the announcement that the NBL Grand Final series had been cancelled, and the press conference led by Paul Smith, Chris Pongras and Will Weaver of the Sydney Kings. It has been a remarkable week in the world, and as I said, anytime something this big and major happens, it's always going to in turn affect sport. Before we get to you, Jeremy, Larry Kesselman, of course, the statement I mentioned, it was around about 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time that went out this afternoon, but essentially Grand Final series over, and now we've got a 48-hour window to see how it all plays out. Jeremy, thank you for joining us. And before Liam Santamaria really lets loose, I mentioned last Thursday afternoon, just talk us a little bit in your role as Commissioner, how it has all been from a headquarter point of view where everything just changed.
I think, to sum it up, chaotic would be fair. It's been a flurry of phone calls between, in particular, the league office and the owners and management of each of the Perth Wildcats and the Sydney Kings, and the Australian Basketball Players Association also. So it's been a very collaborative, consultative process between Thursday and now. So going back, Thursday was immediately prior to Game 2 of the series, Game 2 being played on the Friday in Perth. At that time, we got together on what was quite a long phone call with the owners and management of both clubs and started playing out scenarios as things continued to escalate from a coronavirus point of view. At that time, we flagged a number of different possibilities and how this series may play out. We talked about the possibility of a 3-game series and tested the team's attitudes towards potentially deciding at that point in time to play a 3-game series. We explored opportunities for accelerating the series, even if it was to be 5 games. We talked about what travel meant and whether or not there was virtue in playing the games potentially in one city rather than crisscrossing the country. And then ultimately on Friday, the decision was made that, well, if we are going to go ahead and play games, we're going to need to play them in closed venues. So it was a cascading series of conversations, I guess, that ramped up in terms of their consequences as the nature of the coronavirus pandemic continued to play out more broadly.
And today, developments of today, when you woke up this morning, I have no doubt it's an ongoing, as you said, chaotic conversational situation, but when you woke up today and the developments that led to the announcement, what was today like?
Well, as I mentioned, periodically over the last few days, we've been to both parties and said, are you still comfortable proceeding on the current basis? Wherever we could, we were seeking to do things by consultation and agreement, and if all 3 parties, being the clubs, and the Players Association, so the 2 clubs and the Players Association, were able to strike agreement on the most sensible way forward, then in all likelihood we would hop on board and endorse that, and that's how we had been proceeding. last night or yesterday afternoon, we put it to both clubs, are you still comfortable proceeding on the currently planned schedule of games and your players? We always ask the question of the club and the players. Perth's response was yes. Sydney's response was, we're meeting again with the players tomorrow morning, mid-morning, and we'll get back to you after that meeting. And I guess after, I think it was 2 hours that we knew that they were in the meeting before we'd had any update. And at that point, I guess I was starting to wonder whether or not their view of the world had changed. And of course, ultimately, we know that is the case now, and that they just made a decision as a group, which I think is a perfectly valid and reasonable decision. There are so many disparate views on how to best approach what's happening in the world at the moment. I think that approach is perfectly valid and reasonable, but ultimately it culminated in us having to cancel the series, and with relatively short notice, I guess, of that decision, prior to having to make an announcement and let the public know that the series would be cancelled, at that point we decided that we would park the decision about who is the ultimate champion or whether there's an ultimate champion of the season until such time as we're able to take advice from experts and hear everyone's point of view.
I want to talk further about the decision-making process all the way along, but let's touch on that last point first about how a decision's going to be reached to crown a champion or not. What's that process going to be like?
Well, there's a number of rules of relevance that we need to look at here. The process has already begun. I think all three parties, being the Wildcats, the Kings and ourselves, have all had a good hard look at the rules, and I think we're all firmly of the view that we require a little bit more time to interpret, maybe get some advice from lawyers, experts. I think there are arguments both ways as to why there shouldn't be a winner of the series, or potentially why the Perth Wildcats should be the winner of the series. It's a discussion for, I think, a broader group over a longer period of time than the couple of hours that we had at our fingertips at the time.
We saw during this season a game was called off due to extraordinary circumstances, and we understand there's a clause in the rules that sort of helped a decision to be determined with that game because more than half of it had been played. Is there a clause in the rules that pertains to a series in that regard?
There's nothing that refers expressly to a series, but there are rules around the abandonment of a game, and that could be more than one game. Doesn't specify regular season, finals or anything else. And that's some of the ambiguity that we need to work through over the next 48 hours. But certainly there is some guidance there in terms of what can occur in the instance of abandonment. Ultimately, there is a fair amount of discretion there for the league to make a decision as to what is the appropriate outcome. The two express outcomes that are referred to are rescheduling or cancelling. We've already made an announcement that the games are cancelled, so that part has already progressed, and now we need to determine what happens in terms of the result.
Just on that, I'm assuming that rescheduling wasn't even an option.
Rescheduling, I guess, not an option because things are expected to get worse before they get better. And at that point in time, who knows who's going to be available in terms of staffing, resourcing and all the rest. It would have been played completely out of context with the rest of the final series.
When you guys made the decision, along in consultation with the two teams, the agreement you were talking about before, that the series would progress with no fans in the arena, the doors would be closed to the general public, but that if at any point between then and the end of the series, one of the players or someone involved contracted the virus, the whole thing would be called off. To be sitting here today with the whole thing called off, even though that didn't happen, does that surprise you? How do you feel about that?
What surprises me is how quickly everything has escalated. The world is a different place to what it was 48 hours ago to what it was 48 hours before that. That's disconcerting, that's surprising. Look, at the end of the day, and I made the point earlier, I think it was a reasonable decision. The decision impacts upon people beyond just the playing group. Yes, there was an element, I think, in the decision-making of not wanting to travel because there is some risk associated with travel in itself. But also, we have to take into account that many of our players have families overseas. They have, I guess, a degree of concern as to whether or not they're going to be able to get back into their respective countries to spend that time with their family. The longer this drew out, the more likely it was always going to be that something along these lines happened. I wouldn't have necessarily guessed that this would have been the outcome. If I was guessing, I would have suspected that there would have been a ban on even smaller groupings of people. Of course, at the moment, groupings of more than 500 are banned. I thought that would have come down to 100 or 50, or that events of this nature would have been cancelled. I thought, if anything, that was probably what was going to preclude this series playing out. But I think this is a perfectly valid reason.
We've got a lot of people watching tonight, a lot of supporters of both teams and of supporters of the league who are wondering, they're looking at it, and I want to kind of put it in as simple terms as possible. Perth lead the series 2-1, and the Sydney Kings have decided that they're not going to play the series from here. Is it as simple when you look at that as saying, well, that means Perth wins, or is there more to it than that?
Oh, there's definitely more to it than that. I mean, you look at the broader context of the fact that the series wasn't able to be concluded. Now, the reason we put it to teams prior to Game 2 as to whether or not they wanted to play a 3-game series was because there was always a possibility that maybe we weren't going to be able to play Games 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. We didn't know. But if we can get 3 games away, do we want to make the decision now that we end it there, rather than making an awkward decision after Game 3 before Game 4, where there is the best part of a week in between and therefore the biggest opportunity for something to go wrong? I think the view was, let's push on and hope for the best and see what we can get away. So I don't think it's as simple as that. There is broader context to it. That's certainly one point of view, and it's one that we will be testing very closely. The other is, well, the Sydney Kings didn't have the opportunity to play Games 4 and 5 and could easily have won those 2 games. But that didn't transpire, and so we have the cards that we've been dealt, and now we need to interpret them the way that we think best.
The question about charter flights was obviously a big part of the consideration. There are lots of considerations that the Kings have taken into account in making this decision, but one of them was about the comfort and of travelling across the country and back potentially. This idea of charter flights, where did that get to at any point?
I mean, it was discussed, and we said to both teams, if you want a charter flights, we're able to procure that for you, much like at any other point in time, I guess. And the choice was with the clubs. Our point was always that we were acting in accordance with government advice. At no point did any government ever state that it wasn't safe to fly domestically. And just like the fact that we could have been overly cautious and stopped the series after Game 1, but we didn't. We proceeded on the basis of the advice that we were being given, both by government, by our Chief Medical Officer, by the health ministers of the respective states. And that was the basis on which we were going to proceed.
Are you aware of the Wildcats and the Kings organisations having conversations at all? I assume there have been any communication since the decision's been made in any way? Not
with one another, to my understanding. They've certainly both been in communication with us fairly frequently. To my understanding, they haven't spoken to one another as yet. And
you mentioned the 48 hours and so many different avenues to work through. Is part of that having maybe possibly a submission or a suggestion from the club as to why, or the clubs as to why they should win the championship compared to the other one and vice versa?
I think it's fair to say we've received submissions in an informal manner, and I expect that we will probably receive more submissions this evening and tomorrow. But I think there will be further dialogue as well. None of these decisions have been made in a vacuum. We're incredibly lucky in some respects that we are 99.5% of the way through our season, and so this dialogue has been between 3 parties. We haven't had to cater for the needs and desires of every club. If we had, the NBL would not have had a choice but to unilaterally make every decision. But we have been able to do this by consultation. The parties have been open and transparent and communicable, which has been great. But at some point we are going to have to draw a line and decide on a champion.
Can I go back a little bit to you were talking before about the conversations around potentially changing the series to become a best of 3. Game 1 was played, there was almost a week in between, and then there was going to be 2 and 3 in quick succession with 4 and 5 further down the road. With the beauty of hindsight, we now know that probably would have been the ideal scenario with where we've ended up. Where did those discussions get to at what points in time?
So on the Thursday, we had a long conversation that was, I think, when we initially canvassed the idea of a a 3-game series, bearing in mind that at that point Perth had a 1-0 lead with a game being played in Perth on Friday. Certainly the Kings were adamant that they wanted to play a 5-game series, understandably. To have a do-or-die game away from home to win the championship would have been pretty intimidating for them. So totally understand that decision. And I think Perth were understanding of Sydney's views at the time as well, and so didn't want to, I'm putting words in their mouth, but my impression was they weren't nearly as vocal in respect of that conversation. So I think they essentially acquiesced to going along with trying to play out a 5-game series, or rather not insisting on it being a 3-game series. All parties on the call at the time indicated their strong preference that it remain a 5-game series. That in an ideal world, if we could get all 5 games played, that would be everyone's preference. It's what would do the season justice, would do the players, coaches, fans, staff justice. And so that's what everyone was hoping for at the time. As you say, with the benefit of hindsight, probably the wrong decision.
I'm sure you had other things to do on a Tuesday night, or at least 24 hours ago you had a different Tuesday night plan to spend time with us. But we thank you. We obviously he's continued to go on, not just in a sporting world, but also in everyone's world. It's changing, as you touched on, almost by minute. So it's disappointing. This is the way it has to be. I'm sure that you and the league headquarters and everyone involved and the 250,000 NBL Red Army and Kings fans are going to give their suggestions on social media over the next couple of days while you work through that. But we appreciate you coming in and give us a little bit of clarity around what has been a remarkable 5 days. And thank you again, mate. And what we're going to do while you're here, Homicide's about to join us as well. The basketball did not. Game 1, of course, played in front of fans. Game 2 and 3 was at an all-time level. And sounds of the game is a little bit different when there's no fans. So as we say goodbye to you and welcome Homicide in, we're going to go back and have a little look at how it sounded in the last 2 games in the NBL Grand Final Series. Thank you.
Don't start with a wow, Trev. I had enough of wow in game 2. Mate, we're not wrong on every call, so please stop moaning, all right? They gotta stop playing after the whistle. You walk to the basket, stop.
We'll get rid of favourite memory of NBL 20.
I mean, just if we get to that point.
And it ends, the sounds of the game with Bryce Cotton nodding because he has been unbelievable. Nick Kay was outstanding. We know that it was 2-1 to the Wildcats, and now we wait for, remarkably, a 48-hour continual conversation to see if and who will be crowned NBL 20 champion. We do welcome in Corey Homicide Williams. Hello to you.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
Not a lot to be happy about,
Now,
but we're here.
you obviously watched that, and Jeremy, and so much of the conversation's been going on since those murmurings, I think, early today. We're doing this, of course, on a Tuesday night. What have you made of it, and any thoughts?
Extremely unfortunate, the circumstances that we're dealt, but, you know, it is what it is. The rest of the world, we're not alone in this, and the rest of the world has cancelled all sports, so.
All right, let's you know what we do? There's 3 games. We haven't yet got a champion yet, but let's focus on the fact that, and I said this 3 or 4 times, Liam, and I'll go to you first, and both of you gentlemen called a game over the course of the weekend, which is unique when, you know, the fans and all the crowd noise coming through. The games did not suffer. It was some of the highest, as you would expect in a grand final, some of the highest quality basketball of NBL 20, which is a credit to everyone on the court and involved in the 2 teams.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about this a little bit yesterday, just how extraordinary it was that the players were able to go out and play at that level. We are all, across the globe, extremely distracted right now and impacted, you know, mentally and emotionally. And for them to not allow that to impact them in those ways and physically to be able to go out and play at that level was really remarkable. I tip my hat to them. And, you know, as I was writing that and thinking further about it, I'm not surprised that we've got to this point, because it really was extraordinary what they were doing. Obviously, this was the one game at the start of the series that we did have the fans in the building. Boy, imagine if this thing had have gone, played out the distance with the fans in the building. This could have become an all-time great series, because these are two extraordinary teams with so much talent on display, led by that man, Bryce Cotton, who has been tremendous. And it's such a shame. Obviously, this tipped things off with the Wildcats able to go into Sydney and get this win, put them up in the series, steal away home court advantage. And from there, everything completely changed. And we landed here on Friday night in this bizarre, extraordinary, unique, kind of eerie setup of playing grand final games with no crowds. Now, it was a credit to the league and the teams that they made that call. Didn't have to. The mass gatherings ban wasn't mandatory at that point. It was a socially responsible decision to make, but it left us with this peculiar situation. But as you say, the players continued to turn out and ball out.
Bryce Cotton, we all agree, is the MVP? Grand final MVP.
Well, I mean, has it been announced? I'm not going to speak out of turn.
Oh, you're voting, aren't you? Okay, I'll talk to you. No, well, I'm not even sure how that works, but was he if there's an MVP to be named after 3 games, is it Bryce Cotton?
Of course, if they win the championship, if they're crowned champion. But what he's able to do is unbelievable. Look, I played here 2007 and 2011. I've never seen a guard kill a league in the manner that he's killing. They say, which we all can say, is this the best we've ever seen in the NBL? Across the board, the talent, teams, defenses, structures, athleticism, everything in the books. What he's done in 4 years, if they are crowned champion, in 4 years, 3-time champion, 2-time finals MVP, 2-time MVP of the league. Who's coming to a league at its best and done this in 4 years in the history of this league as an import? Tell me that, and I'll take back my statement. We all have opinions, you know, but this is what my opinion, and I'm standing by it. The way he's scoring, you see the type of defense they're throwing on him? He's not 7 foot. He's not extremely athletic. He's not 250 pounds. Look what he's doing at the size that he's doing. Casper Witt's the best two-way player in this league. He locks up guards. Casper Witt, besides the fact he's bleeding points at both ends on defense and offense, he can't do nothing with Bryce Cotton. They went triangling too. It worked the first time. The second time, what happened? What happened? Then they start doubling. Whatever they throw at him, you're not stopping this guy. This is the greatest import to ever play. I don't care. I don't care what nobody said. With all respect to the OGs prior, what he's doing on the best defenses, the best the league's ever been, come on, man. First 4 years, tell me an import that's done that at the rate he's doing it.
It's been...
Come on, man.
That
dude is great. Casper's a great... He ain't giving me nothing on offense, but he's a great defender. And what Cotton has been doing every time. Not once. Every time. Tell me somebody that can do that, man, on a defender like Casper. That's not easy. That ain't normal. That kid right there, he's great. That man, he's great. We're not going to deny him. Look at that. Then when Bogut steps up, nice hezzy head fake, go around, floater. Like that's the first quarter. These are key baskets he's hitting. None of this is easy. This is the grand final. This is not preseason in Tassie, okay? This ain't round 1 to round 5. This is the grand final where we need this to go back home to finish it. That's greatness, man. We're not going to sit here and violate or disrespect or think any different. That is greatness, what Bryce Cotton is doing.
All right. Do we have an opinion on what, in your opinion, what should happen in 48 hours' time? Or whenever this is announced? I'll start with you, Liam.
I can't see it. In my personal view, I would find it surprising to see a situation. I can't find an angle that doesn't have the Perth Wildcats named as the champions. They're 2-1 up in the series. They're ready to keep playing as per what was previously agreed. Now, I completely understand Sydney's decision, and I support it, because any time we're putting the health and safety of our players and the people involved first, then that is how we need to operate. But they are the ones making that call. The Wildcats lead the series 2-1. If it was 1-1, if it was 2-2, it would be a different kettle of fish. It would be a different consideration. But under the current circumstances, I think the Wildcats are the winners.
I mean, we know the vibes, man. We know the vibes. I don't have to answer it. We know the vibes.
I agree. I just don't think there is any way, team leading the series, I don't think it even necessarily, because we all kind of agree the situation about it being unprecedented, and Jeremy touched on it earlier about the fact that, you know, not necessarily a forfeiture as he spoke about, but the fact is a team's leading 2-1. You can't get. I understand Sydney have had an outstanding season, and I couldn't agree any more with the decision. I understand exactly where it's coming from, but the people who are arguing and you know, we love the opinions here, and you can always hashtag NBL Overtime to get involved, to try and lean back on what happened in the regular season. It's either a Perth Wildcat win a championship, or there is no champion for NBL 20. And I guess that's what the league are going to have to work through in the next 48 hours.
But let's go into this. Let's go into the history of the grand finals. History.
Yeah.
Who wins game 1 30 out of 31 times in grand final series win the championship? In history, who wins game 3 100% of the time wins the championship? So history says, and statistics say, Perth won game 1 and 3.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. That's.
Well, I like it. You know what? I love.
I'm doubling it down.
I love you thinking outside the square. All right, you know what? This is.
Can I just flag it? Because Corey was talking about greatness with regards to Bryce Cotton, and he's been a joy to watch. And it's a shame we don't get to watch him do his thing. And
we would have saw the same thing next game. It doesn't stop.
We probably would have.
Didn't he break the record in the grand finals or
across
the points?
Season, across the season, yeah. Against
nothing changes.
But while we're talking about greatness, here's hoping that's not the last time we saw Damian Martin on an NBL court. Here's hoping that's not the last time we saw Andrew Bogut on an NBL court, because those guys are greats of Australian basketball.
Those are staples. Those are pillars.
And you know, I mean, and if
Australian basketball,
if Damian
that's
Martin
a fact.
ends up hoisting a trophy as a result, then that would be, you know, his 6th title, and that's terrific. And him and Jesse Wagstaff, the first guys to do that potentially for the same team, joining Stiff and CJ Bruton. He's an absolute great, and it was already going to be a bit weird if his last time on an NBL court was going to be with no crowd. Now, he hasn't made any statements.
Right.
It's just a genuine possibility that he may not play on this year. And if that is the case, it's a shame, but we should highlight it so that people can have the opportunity to get ready to celebrate those guys.
You know what? Let's highlight, touching on that, let's highlight Andrew Bogut. If this is Andrew Bogut's last season playing basketball, what he has been able to do in his career, 14 years in the NBA, counting last year, to come back home and blow this league up and give it legitimacy. Because guess what? As a brother from the NBA, he's a part of that fraternity. He makes this league that much more valid because he's playing in it. And to help bring Sydney back and have them on top, nothing but respect. And on top of that, yes, we go back and forth, but on top of that, what you were able to do in the grand finals, game 1 and game 2, 18.5 points per game and 12 rebounds.
Yeah.
My ultimate respect, because I can tell you this, you gave it your all. And a win, lose, or draw, any man that give it their all, I ain't got nothing but respect for.
All right, we've got less than a minute. Firstly, who sets an alarm during we know we're doing a TV show? Secondly, favourite memory of NBL 20? Not exactly the...
Mellow ball, back-to-back, triple-doubles.
I knew that'd fire you up.
Mellow ball, back-to-back, triple-doubles. My hands down. You got to remember, when they first came on this platform, I grilled them both.
Has he...
I gave them the business. That was my highlight, because he made me believe it from then, because that was the same weekend ESPN picked them, projected #1.
Has he signed with Puma, yes or no?
I don't know.
Okay, Liam, in 30 seconds or less. In fact, make it 25.
Casper Ware torching and Melbourne United across the journey of the regular season and barking at their bench and their owners. That was a whole bunch of fun.
I'm going to give it to the Cairns Taipans their entire year. It was something that surprised us. It was fun to watch, and it hasn't ended, I guess, the way that all of us thought. Now, of course, it is a changing world. I keep touching on it. Wash your hands, cough into your elbow, look after each other, because not just from a basketball fraternity, but from everyone else here at NBL Overtime, keep safe.